So, hello everybody. I'm here with a Marxist-Leninist YouTuber called Fellow Traveler. I'll put the links to his YouTube channel in the description below. So, do you want to start by talking about the whole COVID-19 situation that's going on right now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're talking about reopening, and which is a bad idea. Like, the quarantine that we're having right now isn't even like a quarter, it's not even 100th of what we should be doing. Really, if we locked down like China, we could have stopped it, but tragically, money trumps stopping a pandemic. And, I mean, I'll just say this. Scientists and people in the military have been warning about COVID for years, and we could have been researching a vaccine as early as 2016, but we weren't because it wasn't profitable. Why would we research a vaccine for a disease that barely anybody is infected with?
Yeah.
We just let it fester. We didn't do anything about it, and only now that millions of people are infected and hundreds of thousands of Americans are going to lose their lives to the virus, is Big Pharma now finally scrambling to do something about it? What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I mean, Trump was literally promoting a drug that doesn't even work to deal with COVID-19. I think he's done that multiple times now. Now, obviously, no matter what the administration was going to be, if it was a Democrat, Republican, they would have totally butchered this because they care about the profits, right? Because they're funded by corporations. But because Trump is especially bad when it comes to caring about science and research and information, I think it was even worse and exacerbated by him being president. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it was definitely made worse because he is most certainly an incompetent buffoon. Donald Trump being president of the United States is like watching the Roman Empire collapse on fast forward.
Right.
He fired all the scientists in charge of the CDC and replaced them with the young Earth creationist Mike Pence. So, so viruses evolve, and you're going to replace it with a guy who doesn't believe in evolution, which is interesting to me, to say the least.
Right. And, I mean, to be fair, like, the reason why I say any president would be bad, as terrible as Donald Trump is because none of them would have pushed for, like, a stronger healthcare system. None of them would be like, hey, screw the landlords. We're going to totally get rid of evictions even after this whole crisis. We're going to, like, do massive jobs programs, like a New Deal style. And even the New Deal wasn't that left-wing. Like, I think you mentioned this in one of your videos. FDR was a compromise to the communists and the far leftist of the time. So, like, no matter who got elected, this would have been bad. But, like, with Trump, it's even worse. It's, like, even exacerbated. That's the way I definitely see it.
Oh, yeah, no, because all they care about is profits. All they care about is making sure the line on the computer screen doesn't go down. So instead of giving trillions of dollars in equity to bail out all the small businesses that are being affected or the working class, we only get like a $1,200 check, and then like trillions of dollars get pumped into the stock market.
Yeah, because
this is literally just the capitalist class paying them.
Yeah, I mean, all they care about is preserving the stock market. Like, that's their primary goal. And it's not even, if you want to preserve capitalism, which is their end goal, this is not even the way you go about it. Like, if you have too much income inequality, if you only focus on investing in the stock market and watching the stock market skyrocket, you don't really have the fundamentals for a sustainable economy because everyone needs to be able to have enough money to live and make those purchases and then stimulate the capitalist economy. So even from a capitalistic perspective, we're not really helping the system. We're just exacerbating it.
Yeah, but to engage in any actual, redistributive wealth policies that would make our economy a lot less top-heavy, that would mean the capitalists would have to give up profits. And for the capitalists to give up profits, you're effectively asking the capitalists to stop being capitalists.
Yeah, that's true. So how much blame do you put on the Chinese government for the COVID-19 crisis? So the way I see it, like, I put a little bit of blame on the Chinese government. Of course, they could have handled it better, but, like, that's not the primary place where I put my blame.
I don't really, to be fair, I mean, they covered up a lot of information that they didn't need to cover up initially, and things like boarding people up inside of their homes and not letting them leave. So you have like infected people starving to death, and that's pretty terrible. But like for the blunders and excesses of the Chinese government, they handled this coronavirus pandemic 10 times better than the way we're handling it right now.
Right, for sure. Like countries that are way too like hyper inequality based and like hyper not capitalistic but private sector oriented is really problematic. Like Russia saw a massive increase in cases. They're one of the highest in total COVID-19 cases. The United States is obviously terrible. And the funny thing is right-wingers kept bringing up Sweden as an example of why we shouldn't lock down. Look at Sweden. They're a majority white country. We don't need to lock down because Sweden isn't locking down. But it turns out Sweden actually has way more cases than Norway and nearby countries. Their healthcare system was totally ruined after they began to privatize. A lot of social democrats talk about how Sweden is a great system and the ideal model the U.S. should live up to. But even Sweden failed totally when it comes to dealing with the COVID-19. So there's been like a lot of incompetence with capitalist-oriented countries because, like we said, the perverted incentive that's set up. So that's a really big problem for sure.
Social democrats are kind of reactionary in the sense that they really only care about getting theirs. Like, they're disenfranchised. A lot of them are these disenfranchised middle-class folk. And they want, their college, their free college and their free healthcare because they're lower income, mid-income. They want to get theirs, I just feel like social democracy is such a huge compromise because even in, like, the most well-advanced social democratic countries on earth, like Norway, Finland, Sweden, they still have homeless people, they still have poverty, they still have, like, waiting lines for food. So, like, they may not have as much per capita compared to the United States, obviously, but they still have it. So they're okay with a little bit of equality as long as it only fucks over a smaller minority of the population, but they get their gives. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and they can't acknowledge the fact that, like, laborers, poor working class laborers in developed countries subsidize third world labor and people that make next to nothing, like 10, 15 cents an hour. Social democracy essentially enables the continual exploitation of foreign countries. So, like, it's a very narrow and vacuous ideology in the sense that it's not very universal in its nature, and it doesn't really care for the exploitation of people on a global scale, but rather in a very limited parameters, I'd say.
Yeah, no, that's because these people have a very narrow scope by which they perceive things. I mean, they're left-leaning, but they're chauvinists. Like, they don't realize that their social democratic social safety net and their consumerist economy are basically bought with the tariffs and the exploitation from the third world. Like, where do you think those T-shirts and that coffee comes from? It comes from, like, Bangladesh and Uganda. Like,
so you brought up something interesting when you said tariffs and also, like, exchange on a global scale. So obviously, since we're anti-capitalist, we have to oppose free trade because fundamentally that's what facilitates exploitation on a global scale. But then at the same time, protectionism obviously is a bad thing. You're just prioritizing other capitalistic industries. So, like, where do you draw the line when it comes to how we establish trade deals and exchanges between different countries?
I believe in trade out of necessity. You buy goods at, like, a decent price or a fixed price from other countries what they have a surplus of, So let's say there's a smaller country that has lithium, like Bolivia, buy their lithium. If we actually, like, engaged in fair trade with these countries like we preach, if we actually engaged in the original idea of neoliberalism, then in theory we actually could have a more egalitarian increase in living standards. The problem is that it's not good enough that, like, everybody has their material conditions improved together. No, instead we have to have some countries be the haves and others be have-not.
Yeah.
So what you get are, like, things like these tariffs, right, that are placed on these goods that are imported from these countries that are sold to us like pennies on the dollar. And these tariffs are what help pay for our social democratic reforms and our welfare scheme.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, the problem is that it would only be free trade truly if it's the workers making those decisions. As much as I don't like market socialism and cooperative-based economies. If it was cooperatives exchanging goods between different locations, that's more free trade than like the CEOs and the capitalist class making the exchanges across the country, because that's not free trade. I mean, the United States, the workers in Michigan didn't choose for those factories to be shut down. They didn't choose for their jobs to be exported. They didn't choose to compete with workers that make, $1, $2 an hour, child labor. That's not free trade. That's only free trade for the corporations and like the ruling class. That's essentially what it is.
Yeah, but the reason why neoliberalism happened is the same reason why most things happen under capitalism: material conditions. We had a profitability crisis in the 70s, with the era of stagflation. Like, there was rampant inflation in the 70s and massive unemployment because unions, didn't want to hire anybody because of the extremely high wages that they had to compensate workers. So stagflation continued through the 70s, and ultimately neoliberalism was the answer. And that was really the only way you could preserve capitalism. So social democracy really could only exist within the context of a world that, the private sector could subsidize it because, they pay most of the taxes anyway. So that's the reason why, social democracy is slowly but surely going the way of the dinosaur, and all our economies and all of our capitalist countries can do is basically cannibalize public sector.
Yeah. So how would you address the argument that we need to achieve social democracy in the United States first to then create the conditions to achieve socialism? Do you think that's not a very compelling line of reasoning to use?
Well, it's a very Bernsteinian line. People have been trying to push for reforms towards socialism for decades, in fact, well over a century. Be it the Kotskyites, the Bernsteinians of old. It's never worked. The problem is that I like to apply Occam's razor. The reason why bourgeois democracy fails to deliver on these reforms is ultimately because liberal democracy is not democratic, I mean, you've got TDMSresearch.com that shows that they deliberately rig the voting machines in favor of the establishment candidate. You have huge discrepancies in the exit polls, not to mention large swaths like the middle class. You have the middle class that has been propped up to act as a populist base of support for the status quo. I mean,
yeah.
Don't even get me started on boomers.
I mean, they always complain that in communist countries it's one-party rule, there's barely any freedom of democracy, and so on and so forth. But in the United States, it's essentially two dominating parties that are always the ones that get elected and selected, and they actively undermine attempts to create a more democratic and vibrant sort of political scene where there's different ideological dispositions, where different people like anarchists or Marxist-Leninists can get power. It's not like that. It's fundamentally antithetical to what true democracy is. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's ultimately just a shift responsibility. The Republicans take the blame for everything that goes wrong because they're the ones that ever do anything, and the Democrats don't do anything except cock-block progressives from getting any progressive policy through, and they constantly compromise. Remember Obama? Obama was supposed to be the great last hope for progressive cause, and he had a supermajority in Congress. He could have gotten single payer if he wanted to, but instead he passed Romney Care, Reagan Care, and just painted his name over it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've heard Noam Chomsky say this, but in some ways Obama was worse than George Bush. I mean, he actually increased the military apparatus in the spying state, and the only way he's better than your standard Republican is that, he passed milquetoast reforms. He didn't even raise the minimum wage one time in his entire 8 years in office, even when he had a supermajority. So he was clearly not a successful president, but Democrats still love him. He has over 80% approval rating because it's still fundamentally a bourgeois party. It's still a party that represents class interests, just a little bit less so than the Republican Party. And there's different financial interests competing with each other.
Yeah, so here's the thing. When it comes to the two-party system and all the people that are involved in U.S. politics, minority of the population. They only constitute a minority of the population. If you actually go to like the actual working class and most people in America, they don't vote. Like, most people are completely disconnected from politics in this country because everything just seems so hopeless to them. So, I would say the answer to all of this is really not partaking in these controlled elections, and that's what they are. They pick the candidates. They ultimately decide, like, who gets elected. But to go to the people directly and see what the woes, issues, and tribulations of the common man are, and to try and like fill that need, because if you provide people with the alternative, then they will heed your call in the grand scheme of things, and they'll be more sympathetic to your cause, like what the Black Panthers were doing with like their free lunches and like providing medicine with people. I'm a big believer in serve the people or mutual aid.
Yeah, I mean, so basically I would prefer like no electoral engagement at all whatsoever, but like also the third party option is helpful in the sense that we do want to bolster third parties, and voting is a form of expression, but like fundamentally, like, people have this false dichotomy where it's burn your bust or vote blue no matter who, when in reality it's about creating the dual power structures. If you're a syndicalist trying to bolster the unions, try to deal with that revolutionary potential, like that direct action is what really fundamentally creates these movements. It's not really voting. Voting has never really changed the movement in any profound sense.
Yeah, the civil rights movement had massive activism and organizing behind it, and same with the socialist and communist movements in the 1930s. There have been multiple periods in this country where we could have gone in a radically different direction than the direction we're going in now if the right people had the right opportunities to take power. I would say if you're going to vote for the candidate that best represents your values. Don't just vote for damage mitigation, because ultimately the Overton window is constantly marching to the right. And I listened to your debate with Xander Hall. You did a very good job, by the way, debating him. But what I will say is the problem with voting for Biden as though damage mitigation, one, he's not legally obligated to uphold any of the promises that he makes, and two, he has a long history of fucking over minorities. So if you really care about minorities, why are you voting for a guy who expanded the police state and the war on drugs and backed literally every war in the Middle East?
Yeah, of course. And obviously their response is going to be that, if you don't vote for Biden, that means you're a class reductionist and you hate marginalized communities. And they're going to flippantly dismiss you like that. Even though, I think Biden recently said that if you vote for Trump, you're not black or something like that. This is the Democrats. Republicans say the Democrats are a plantation, and the way they mean that is not true. But it is true that unlike the new African Black Panther Party or groups that actually represent black interests, the Democratic Party just wants to steal the votes of marginalized communities and actually do nothing to resolve their issues. So that dynamic keeps playing out over and over again.
Oh, yeah, no, that's what politicians do. They say one thing and then do the other. That's how they get nominated and elected. It's just nowadays people are starting to wise up because the internet's a thing and you can fact check people on their bullshit. So they're going to have to be a lot more careful from now on about who they nominate. And, I mean, the issue is the Democratic Party, bear in mind they were the party of slavery, just throwing that out there right now. I know that's a common right-wing talking point, but I'm just throwing out there that they used to be even more xenophobic than they are now. But it's silly to think that the Democrats are the progressive choice just because some of them are. The Democrats usually go along with a lot of the reactionary policies that are implemented in our country.
Yeah, they support Israel. That's as reactionary as you can get. That's an apartheid state. So, if you're a party that claims you're left-wing and then you support the Netanyahu regime, then you're not really somebody who can be described as left-wing or not reactionary. Even Obama admitted that there's almost no significant difference or profound difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. Like, they try to amplify how different they are, how profoundly different they are, but they're really not. Like, Obama was the deporter-in-chief. He continued the military state apparatus. He did nothing about the clean water in Flint, Michigan, like trying to get clean water to that region. He kept Guantanamo Bay intact. So, like, there really isn't a fundamental difference between the two parties. It's like kind of a show, essentially.
Yeah, it's a spectacle. I mean, it's like I've said before, apply Occam's razor. Bourgeois democracy isn't democratic because it's ultimately the moneyed interests that pick all the candidates and who gets nominated. So if we can't go within the structure of the establishment to meet our means and actually try to accomplish, the agendas that we want to accomplish, we're forced to go outside of that establishment, are we not?
Yeah, of course. So I was curious what you thought about, obviously you support direct action, but some people think that optics is not that important and like violence in this current period of time is the best form of direct action. So what do you think about that perspective of applying political violence in a modern context?
Well, first and foremost, I would never tell you to go out and engage in any sort of violence. What I will say is that the powers that be engage and unleash all kinds of forms of violence and terror and repression upon you on a regular basis. So any violence that you engage in against them, say doxing police officers, destroying their home, or let's see, neo-Nazis turning up dead in random locations. I do not condone these actions, by the way. I'm not telling you to do these things, but I'm simply saying that this is self-defense.
It is. I mean, the liberal position on free expression, the one that I used to have, it assumes like it operates under this presupposition that, Richard Spencer giving a speech is merely just that. He's just giving a speech, but he's actually reaffirming the racist state apparatus, whether it be the FBI, whether it be these various organizations. Like, they're literally shutting down Black Lives Matter pages. And Black Lives Matter isn't a perfect movement. I mean, it's largely been infiltrated by corporate interests, but fundamentally, the federal government is a racist institution, and political violence can be effective within a certain context. Like, sometimes, like, if I were to punch Ben Shapiro in the street randomly, that's not a very, productive application of political violence. But we've seen throughout history, without Malcolm X, I doubt the civil rights movement would get as far as it did. So, there is an application of political violence that can be effective and helpful.
Well, yeah. This is kind of I guess this is kind of a consequentialist standpoint, but it's really the consequences of the actions that matter. I mean, are you just going to engage in peaceful protests? I'll tell you what's going to happen if you try to fight peacefully. I mean, you're going to get mowed down by your enemies, tragically. So, I mean, you've got to fight, and let me just put it like this. The issue is, nobody's doing anything. I probably want to be one of the first people to join, a guerrilla group, in all honesty. If I was a guerrilla group living out in the woods, and there's, thousands of them, I'd probably grab my AK and, my body armor and my nagants and, some food to join them. But the problem is, nobody wants to shake shit up. Nobody wants to actually, challenge the status quo. And that's the reason why things don't fundamentally change. Tragically, the way it is social change is kind of purchased with blood. I mean, I don't really know how else to put it.
Yeah, for sure. So I know you have to go in a little bit, so I'd say last question. What would you say would be your primary advice? Because a lot of people are torn, apart because Bernie lost. A lot of people are emotionally sad and they really can't get over that loss because of how terrible it was. So what do you think people should do going forward to try to continue his legacy, or even beyond that, the left-wing agenda, try to get that through?
Join a political organization that most closely represents your interests. Take up other skills besides being good at political economy and leftism. Definitely read books. Definitely get good at that, though. The other thing is try to engage in action that brings people into your cause, agitation, propaganda, theory. But I would say just getting more involved politically. I mean, there's more to politics than just voting. You need to engage in action like that forwards our cause.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the conversation. And you can find his channel in the description below.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.